Welcome to Black History Month at Coppin State University. We are so excited to have you and join us on this amazing presentation on AI surveillance in the Black workplace and how to organize against it. Today, help me welcome Omar Ocampo, whom is a researcher at the Program on Inequality and the Common Goods at the Institute for Policy Studies. Also, I have AJ Schutman, is a Henry A. Wallace Fellow at the Institute of Policy Studies, and his work focuses on economic justice and social policy with special emphasis on labor history. Welcome to you both, and we're excited to hear your presentation.
Yes, thank you for that. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm just going to ask for some feedback, making sure everyone can see it. So just give me 1 second. Here. Then can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So, so first I would like to thank Yolanda for the invitation and Coppin State University for providing me with the space and platform to give this presentation on this very important topic, and to my colleague AJ for his hard work and collaboration. And as Yolanda mentioned in the introduction, my name is Omar Campo, and I'm a researcher at IPS. And a lot of my work, research focuses on economic inequality, what contributes to it, what policies can we advance in order to reverse it, and so we can live in a more just, peaceful, and sustainable society where prosperity is shared by all. And artificial intelligence plays a very important role in this, since it has the potential to exacerbate many of the economic inequalities that exist in our society, especially for Black Americans. But we also have the potential to organize against it and give ourselves a layer of protection and to build enough power so we can appropriate this technology for our purposes. And it is of vital importance that we properly diagnose the problem, not believe the hype that is sometimes fed to us by big tech and the big tech oligarchs, and to focus our organizing efforts against surveillance. Our presentation here will cover these themes listed, and our goal is basically to get a proper understanding of what AI is, and make sense of our current AI boom. Even though AJ and I are skeptical of AI's ability to fully automate industries and produce job losses at a large scale, it is a disruptor because it excels in surveillance, and this will have a negative economic impact on the Black working class, where it will hurt their future earning power, which is why workers need to organize against AI and fight for a more democratic deployment of this technology. So, what is artificial intelligence? So the term was first appeared in the summer of 1956, when a group of scientists organized a conference at Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire, with the purpose of trying to develop a research project related to thinking machines. And the goal was to figure out how to make a machine simulate the intelligence of a human, or at least figure out how to program a machine so it can learn like a human being. The attendees at this conference, pictured here on the right, they coined the term artificial intelligence and basically established a new field of research that set off the AI revolution and the current AI boom. So what is artificial intelligence? It is a computer program that conducts advanced statistical pattern matching and pattern recognition. To borrow a phrase from Gary Marcus, who's a cognitive scientist who conducts research on AI, he basically says, AI really is a form of advanced autocomplete with a massive library of data, and it draws upon these data sets to produce what is statistically probable. So if I ask ChatGPT, for example, who was the first professional basketball player to win Most Valuable Player, it will begin to analyze its large data set, and the response it provides will be the most probable statistically, and the answer it would generate would be Bob Pettit. And I think this is important to highlight because there's no thought involved in these AI systems. AI cannot think. It cannot draw meaningful generalizations. It does not understand anything. It can't be creative. It can't be innovative. It can't infer anything. Um, but the way AI has been marketed has led consumers and led us to believe that big tech is on the verge of building an AI system or model that will match human intelligence and eventually surpass us in the near future. And it is this propaganda that has generated a lot of excitement and anxiety in the current boom in artificial intelligence. Now, our current boom, AI boom, is largely thanks to the introduction of ChatGPT, which became extremely popular at the end of 2022. It was free and easy to use, and it generated responses almost like in conversational form. This might be a hot take, but the technology that powers ChatGPT is actually not much different compared to what existed before. The first chatbot was called Eliza, and it was created in 1966. And the difference today is that we have a lot more computing power. That is, we have more capacity to process data, to store data, which allows the machine to perform tasks at a much higher scale. And we now have a lot more efficient hardware as well for storage as well, and a lot more data available at our fingerprints. So these AI systems are fed libraries and libraries of data. So a lot of the text that ChatGPT generates, come from scientific papers, books, news articles, Wikipedia, and basically the entirety of the internet, where web pages are scrapped for data. Me personally, I quickly realized the limitations of ChatGPT pretty early on, because I would ask it a question that I already knew the answer to, thanks to my job as a researcher at IPS, and it would give me the wrong answer, and I would ask it to, like, hey, can you give me proof? Can you substantiate it? Give me a source, and it would either give me a link to a specific website, or it would give normally it would not no longer work. But regardless of the limitations, the hype around AI was massive. It was undoubtedly very good at certain things. For example, it's good for helping computer scientists write and debug code. And this spurred massive corporate investment into artificial intelligence, and billions of dollars began being poured into the development of AI. So when AJ and I began to research some of these AI companies, we were surprised to learn that many of them are not even profitable, including OpenAI. So they attract a lot of venture capital, but revenue from sales are actually not that great, and operational costs are high, so which means profit margins are very slim and non-existent. So what is the end goal here for big tech? What's the goal of developing artificial intelligence? And I also want to acknowledge here, a lot of my thought here is influenced by a cloud architect named Dwayne Monroe. He's currently writing a book on the political economy of artificial intelligence. And the short answer is the end goal is to create an autonomous system or a robot that can match or surpass us in intelligence, so it can solve real world problems. And this is normally called artificial general intelligence. But there's a dialectic at play here, because from the perspective of an AI developer or a company that sells AI-powered products, their logic is to oversell the potential of AI to the public and to an investor class, and to advertise the fact or the illusion that they've made that enormous breakthroughs are right around the corner, and that this hype allows them to attract the necessary capital so they can continue doing their work. Now, for companies that invest their resources, so these companies invest a lot of resources in creating media hype. So the most famous is like Boston Dynamics, where there's like a robot doing backflips or completing a variety of tasks. There's even one where there's like a robot dog that's firing an automatic weapon. The purpose is to give the impression to the public that this technology is really advanced, but these videos are more often than not carefully curated. The robots are not autonomous, they are remote controlled. big tech in the business class, they are interested in this technology for other reasons, and they are attracted to the idea of a highly efficient robot that can increase productivity and put downward pressure on wages. The business class want to lower their operational costs so it is in their interest to attack labor and use AI as a form of labor discipline. So if you organize your colleagues, if you make demands for better working conditions or higher wages, then these companies will simply, at least the story is told that they will simply invest in this technology and fire us all. So we are told by ideologues and the wealth defense industry that labor organizing will simply accelerate this process of robots taking over your job. And so in short, its purpose is to devalue the power of labor. There has been a big push the past couple of years to build up the infrastructure of AI, so to build data centers, to make available the computational power needed for AI. So on the right here, there's a picture of inside of a data center, and it's just rows and rows of servers stacked on top of each other that they run 24/7, 365. The size of these data centers can vary. The campuses can be as large as multiple football fields. So yeah, they're really big, and they cost billions of dollars to construct. And for the Trump administration, for example, on his second day in office, he said he supported the construction of Stargate, which is a venture by OpenAI in collaboration with Oracle and SoftBank, and it will cost $500 billion in the next 4 years. And before going to the next slide, I think it's important to highlight DeepSeek, which is an AI chatbot that was recently developed by China. It caused quite a stir and panic in Silicon Valley because of how cheaply they were able to create their technology. So DeepSeek has the potential to bring down the cost of AI development in the future. Now, what are the concerns over AI? And there are a lot. Sticking with the data center, for example, data center as an example, the main concern is like climate change, right? Data centers consume a large amounts of water. This water is necessary to cool down the server equipment that overheats. Data centers just consume a lot of energy, and they're putting significant strains on the power grids of many cities and states. Big tech companies are even starting to bypass some of these electrical grid systems, and they're building their own plants to generate energy just to power these data centers. And so they're funding like nuclear energy startups or natural gas plants. So basically, big tech is putting climate change goals on hold just to develop artificial intelligence. Another concern is that it crosses the threshold where robots can learn like a human being and match our intelligence, and they will go rogue, and we can't control them. Basically, it'll be like Terminator style apocalypse. And lastly, and this is like the central part of our presentation, there are concerns over the economics of this, of job losses. There are concerns over the quality of jobs, that they will be degraded over the next few years, and that this will supercharge economic inequality. Microsoft is actively promoting their investment into AI and they're pitching it to other companies as a way for them to reduce their workforce, to lay off their workers. So basically their business pitch is spend money on our AI-powered products and services, you need less workers because we can automate many of the office tasks and your labor costs would basically disappear. Interestingly, alarm over surveillance is just now starting to be rung. So, what will be the impact of AI on the Black community? Well, I think it's important to look at a few economic indicators and give a brief explanation at where we are and how the emergence of AI will impact these economic prospects. So we agree with the consensus that it will worsen socioeconomic indicators, but not because jobs will be automated, but because increased surveillance, especially on Black workers, will force them to work more for less wages in return, and because it will heighten employer discrimination. So So just to give some statistics, since the 1970s, the overall trends of income and wealth inequality have accelerated for the worse. So many of the wage and wealth gains of the past like 30, 40 years have flowed upwards to not just the top 1%, but the top 0.1%. And these regressive economic trends have supercharged historic racial wealth and income disparities. So here we have some statistics that give us a snapshot of the ongoing racial inequality. So this first graph here is the distribution of assets by race in the fourth quarter of 2023. And these assets include, real estate, ownership of private businesses, ownership of stocks and bonds, income a person will receive when they retire, et cetera. And, white households have $137 trillion in their possession compared to $6 trillion for Black households. So this data is from the Federal Reserve's distribution of financial accounts. It's also important to highlight that this does not take into account any debt or liabilities, but simply ownership of assets. This next graph is the median household wealth. Every 3 years, the Federal Reserve conducts a survey of consumer finances, and this last survey was published in 2023, looking at 2022 data. And white households have median wealth of $285,000 compared to $45,000 for Black households. So there has been minimal progress in most socioeconomic indicators over the past 40 years, and we cannot expect artificial intelligence, especially when it's in the hands of big tech, to advance any solutions or interventions that will properly address these disparities. It will not expand land or homeownership access. They will not construct permanently affordable social housing. It will not provide universal health care. It won't build assets for individuals and communities, and it won't break up concentrated wealth. The goal of big tech is to maximize profit, lower labor costs, and increase productivity. Without federal programs and national practice to address these disparities, then AI will simply widen these gaps. Now, and then going back to this slide, and this was also the conclusion of a report published by McKinsey and Company. When I was reading that report, there was a quote to me that stood out, and it's two sentences. I only put it partially in the slide, but I will read it in its entirety. So, open quote: Black Americans capture only about 38 cents of every dollar of new household wealth, despite representing 13% of the U.S. population. If this trend continues and projections of growth of Black households are accurate, by 2045, racially disparate distribution of new wealth created by generative AI could increase the wealth gap between Black and white households by $43 billion annually, close quote. And the reason why this is the case is because Black Americans are overrepresented in roles that are most likely to be taken over by automation. And these includes, according to industry projections, these include occupations like office work, production work, so things like, a job that requires operating machinery or manufacturing, food services, and mechanical installation and repair. So these occupations are particularly vulnerable. Now, if we look at this graph, it demonstrates that jobs that allow for some upward mobility are at serious risk of disruption. There are two types of jobs targeted here, Gateway and Target. These jobs pay decent wages and allow for a certain level of career growth, and these jobs can be attained without a 4-year university degree. And with the advent of generative AI, according to this report, more than half of all Gateway jobs are expected to be fully automated, and 45% of all Target jobs will be fully automated. And what this means is that for the majority of Black Americans, avenues for upward economic mobility are effectively closed. So opportunities for earning a decent income, the ability to save, to invest, and to build wealth will be denied. I would argue that the estimate provided by McKinsey on how much the wealth gap will grow is actually on the conservative side, because it assumes that the wealth generated by AI will follow the same distribution patterns as in the past. I would argue that it will get more concentrated at the top because technology is usually a winner-take-all market. If their predictions are correct, generative AI will worsen socioeconomic inequalities and increase the economic precarity of the Black working class. AJ and I, as stated before, we're skeptical of mass-scale job losses. We do not believe it is around the corner. But this does not mean that the job losses may never happen, or may never happen in the short term, or that large-scale job losses may not happen in the future. Our argument is that with the way technology is currently set up and structured, it just won't occur. And the reason for that is that AI needs us more than we need it. As stated earlier, AI is not autonomous. It cannot think. It cannot learn like a human. So therefore, it needs our data. So without access to our intellectual output and the content that we produce, AI will be left with outdated and lower quality information. There's already some evidence that says that the rate of improvement of ChatGPT has slowed down significantly, and it's hitting a data wall. So if we put people and content creators out of business and lay off workers who are able to identify problems and to solve them, come up with new ideas and who are able to innovate, then we have effectively reached a dead end for AI development, because AI needs human human-generated content. But one thing that AI is really good at is surveillance. And people are starting to sound the alarm on this, especially after Larry Ellison, the co-founder of Oracle, predicted that there will be a network of AI cameras surveilling and recording everybody in the future. So it's basically an all-out AI police state. But for now, AI technology does give business owners and the professional managerial class a powerful tool to exercise greater control over workers and the production process. AI has made surveillance systems more efficient with features that were previously unavailable. So perhaps the biggest one is the fact that it doesn't have to rely on human operators anymore, or as much as before. So yes, there's Big Brother, things are getting recorded, but there are limits to how, like, how traditional surveillance systems, it used to work before, because you used to have like a team of 2 or 3 people sitting in front of a bunch of screens monitoring, but humans can get distracted, they get tired. But now that's technically no longer a problem, because AI can handle it. It has the ability to detect things in real time, analyze a person's behavior. So there's technology to identify suspicious movements, and it is equipped with predictive analytics to look for any potential threats or criminal activity. And it should go without saying, but this is highly problematic, because a lot of research done by a lot of institutions and research organizations has found that this is particularly biased against Black Americans, and the deployment of this technology in the workplace will also have a negative effect on Black workers, since it exposes them to hyper surveillance from their bosses that will ultimately impact their earning potential, that will expand racial income and wealth gaps. And now I will turn this over to AJ, who can talk about the history and the prevalence of surveillance.
Thanks, Omar. I'm going to be camera off for my part of the presentation, so my bandwidth maintains. But so, as was mentioned in my bio, I have an academic background in history. I'm by no means a professional historian, but I have studied history at the graduate level with an emphasis on working class politics and labor organizing. So I'd like to start my part of this by framing this within a broader historical context before talking about the emerging technologies we see. I think we first need to acknowledge that capitalism, as we understand it, has always been predicated on a racialized labor force. The work of scholars like Oliver Cox, Cedric Robinson, and most recently Robin D.G. Kelly, one of my favorite historians, sheds light on this through the concept of racial capitalism. There's a lot one could say about this idea, but the gist of it is that racial antagonism is key to maintaining class stratification. The capital owning class historically maintains power by fostering a racial hierarchy and sustains that by keeping entire populations as subject labor classes. One of the most effective ways employers have maintained control is through surveillance mechanisms designed to enforce productivity. For Black workers whose labor has been instrumental in the construction of the modern economy, this surveillance has often been more intense and punitive. Of course, during slavery, plantation owners kept records of how much cotton each worker picked, punishing those who fell short of their quota. In sharecropping, white landowners kept Black farmers in cycles of debt through deceptive contracts and constant supervision. And after Reconstruction, convict leasing became quite common, wherein incarcerated workers were heavily monitored and actually continue to be today. The photo I've included here is of Black convict laborers at a railway construction site in North Carolina, circa 1885. I think it's a good reminder of how supervised labor goes hand in hand with new technologies. There's a tendency to believe that whenever a new technology comes on the scene, it's sort of met with societal progress. And that's not necessarily true when the same managerial policing mechanisms are employed as generations before. Indeed, by the early 20th century, after the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, the idea that an unobserved worker is an inefficient one was commonplace. Our argument is that AI-powered surveillance is merely the latest episode in a much longer history of employers attempting to squeeze as much labor as possible out of their workforce by keeping them under constant supervision. So how are we actually seeing AI being deployed in the workplace? The first way that we're seeing it being deployed is by AI actually assuming managerial tasks themselves. And this is through software that decides who gets hired, who gets promoted, and even who gets fired. AI-powered HR software promises efficiency, but in reality, they embed structural biases into decisions that can have an adverse effect on workers from historically marginalized backgrounds. This is because, as Omar explained, generative AI models are built to produce new material based on pre-existing data sets. So for example, if a company has a history of favoring white male applicants, their AI hiring software will pick up on that pattern and subconsciously reinforce it, filtering out resumes from women and people of color before any human ever sees their application. And this isn't just hypothetical. We're starting to see real legal issues emerge out of this practice. In 2022, the US Equal Employment Opportunity Commission filed a lawsuit against iTutor Group Incorporated, which is an English language tutoring company in China that hired US-based tutors to provide remote learning services via an AI application software. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission alleged that iTutor Group software purposely rejected female applicants 55 or aged 55 or older and male applicants aged 60 or older, which is of course discriminatory. The lawsuit was eventually settled in 2023 with iTutor Group paying $365,000 to the applicants victimized by their discriminatory hiring practices. Another case, Mobley v. Workday Incorporated, covers similar issues. Workday Incorporated, a human capital management software vendor, developed an AI-based HR application to select candidates to hire and sold it to hundreds of companies. The plaintiff alleges that Workday's product has actively and systemically discriminated against job applicants who were African American, above the age 40, or had disabilities. While this case is still being litigated currently, the court has accepted the plaintiff's claim that an AI vendor can be directly subject to liability for employment discrimination under Title VII, which sets an important precedent that AI service providers can be held accountable for the biases embedded in their systems. Of course, AI is also creeping into the workplace itself as a sophisticated surveillance device that observes workers with unprecedented precision. This includes cameras that can track movements and even analyze facial expressions. Amazon actually has an infamous camera that tracks the facial expressions of its drivers and financially penalizes them for ordinary behavior like fidgeting with a radio. There's also software that logs keystrokes and monitors screens to ensure that workers, especially those working in remote industries, are constantly scrutinized and every moment of inactivity flagged for review by management. AI is also capable of monitoring collective behavior. Some companies now track internal communications between employees, flagging certain words or phrases in emails and chat messages that management might find troubling. Others use software that raises alerts when too many employees meet in one place at the same time. As you can imagine, this kind of surveillance is profoundly antisocial and discourages organizing efforts, effectively reinforcing workplace hierarchies. AI isn't just reshaping the workplace, it's reshaping who gets to work at all and under what conditions. So what are the impacts of this kind of surveillance? The most immediately clear impact is much stronger managerial control and diminished worker power. If you're working in an environment where your every move is being watched, from what you write on your keyboard to what you and your coworkers talk about, it becomes difficult to organize on a consistent basis. It should come as no surprise then that AI software has already been used explicitly as a union busting tool. Leaked memos from inside Amazon have confirmed their use of AI software to identify union-friendly phrases and behaviors among workers, enabling management to intervene before unionization efforts get off the ground. There's also been much more overt cases of AI-powered union busting. In June of 2023, just 4 days after their helpline workers unionized, the National Eating Disorders Association fired them and replaced the entire staff with an AI chatbot. This plan backfired spectacularly, however, when the chatbot had to be recalled after repeatedly giving harmful health advice. Being monitored in this way has negative effects on the morale of workers across the board. Recent studies indicate that individuals monitored and evaluated by algorithmic surveillance perceive that their autonomy is reduced to a greater extent and report greater intentions to resist the surveillance, criticize the surveillance, and even intentionally perform their job worse. Put more simply, deploying AI as a form of surveillance erodes trust within the workplace and leads to greater job dissatisfaction. As I said earlier, there's a fundamentally antisocial character to these surveillance technologies. As a worker's sense of autonomy wears down, so too does their engagement with the work itself. So although AI surveillance is marketed as a means to increase efficiency in the workplace, it can actually do the opposite. These technologies reduce human labor to data points, simple deliverables, X amount of words written per hour or X amount of product moved. And in so doing, they create a perverse incentive structure wherein workers feel so scrutinized that they inevitably become more concerned with avoiding penalties than actually engaging in meaningful work. So job performance can become worse as a result of these technologies, not better. For our purposes, all of these concerns amplify pre-existing workplace inequities. In The Constant Boss, a report for data and society, Aha Nguyen points out that work speed-ups, employment insecurity, and shifting of risks and costs from employers to workers, and an exacerbation of racial profiling and bias have all been brought about by data collection and the algorithmic management it enables. AI-powered tracking systems are often common in low-wage industries where workers of color are overrepresented. These workers already tend to face harsher discipline from management, have access to fewer advancement opportunities, and operate in more precarious working conditions. AI only amplifies these disparities. Just like AI-powered HR tools inherit systemic bias from historical workplace data, AI surveillance tools carry the same risks, replicating and reinforcing discrimination. Throughout history, Black workers have been disproportionately targeted by workplace retaliation, surveillance, and anti-organizing efforts. AI-driven surveillance essentially supercharges these long-standing tactics by making them available to employers in real time and at virtually no cost. Despite what tech companies may say, this isn't about efficiency, it's about power. If left unchecked, AI surveillance won't just replicate workplace injustices, it will entrench them further, widening the gap between those who make the rules and those who are forced to follow them.
Yeah, and then to build off that, the continuity of surveillance through AI will unfortunately maintain a system of racial bias in the labor and job market that hurts the earning power of Black workers. So there's a lot of stereotypes and prejudice. They incentivize management to monitor Black Americans more heavily, and research has shown that Black workers are actually monitored at a higher rate compared to their non-Black colleagues, which leads to lower levels of tolerance for when Black workers make a mistake on the job. Hence, they are fired at much higher rates, especially if they are relatively early in their tenure at the job. So discriminatory surveillance is correlated with shorter employment durations and longer durations of unemployment. So it hurts future job prospects, and all of this increases the economic precarity of the Black working class, and all of this translates to less income, less housing stability, and limited or no access to healthcare, because most people get their healthcare through their job, and this is all occurring in an environment where the cost of living is skyrocketing. And just to put our argument in basically just one sentence, so our argument is that AI will not replace you, but it will expand workplace surveillance, and this will disproportionately hurt Black workers, especially.
So I know the landscape that we've painted thus far has not been, that bright, but thankfully there are meaningful steps each of us can take to fight back against the negative impacts of AI surveillance in the workplace. The first step in solving any issue is recognizing that there is one, and that begins with education. A lot of people don't even realize how much AI is being used to monitor them or how it's warping workplaces. As I mentioned earlier, there's a common tendency to just assume that new technologies bring with them a sense of progress, and that's not always true. Now that you're aware of how pervasive AI surveillance is becoming and the negative effects it can have, spread the word. The more people who understand what's actually happening, the harder it is for employers to simply brush it under the rug. You should also organize within the workplace to the extent that you can. I know that these surveillance technologies make it difficult to organize, but the only way we can circumvent antisocial surveillance is by adopting pro-social behaviors ourselves. So talk to your coworkers, make AI a workplace issue. If you're in a union, push for AI surveillance to become a bargaining issue. Union contracts can include limits on what AI surveils and the data that it uses to track employees, ensuring that these tools aren't used unfairly to discipline or exploit workers. And this has been shown before. I mean, does anyone remember hot labor summer back in 2023? A large contention within the WGA strike was the use of AI that would have negative impacts on screenwriters. Beyond the workplace, advocate for responsible AI policies in your community. AI is increasingly being deployed in every sector of life, from policing to social services and more. The public has a right to know when and how AI is used, especially when it affects their rights, privacy, and livelihoods. So attend local meetings, pressure lawmakers, and support initiatives that give workers and the public a voice in shaping how AI affects our lives. The most important point I think I can make in this is that technology is not neutral. It reflects the priorities of the people who design and deploy it. AI is no different. If we continue to leave it unchecked, it will only serve the interests of the powerful. This is especially true given the current administration, which is unlikely to pass any meaningful regulation of the tech industry. So instead, regulation will have to come from the persistent, well-informed collective action that demands of these technologies and of these companies transparency, fairness, and above all, democratic accountability.
Awesome. That is our presentation. So here's a list of some of these sources. I definitely recommend people, if they have the ability to check them out. Specifically, something like Dwayne Monroe's Public Cloud as a Public Good, or even the Constant Boss work under digital surveillance, and The Boss is Watching: How Monitoring Decisions Hurt Black Workers. And that is our presentation.
Thank you so much. This was very informative. I do have some questions, and I saw that there were some questions in the chat. And so one of my questions is, how can higher education institutions like Coppin State play a role in educating students about AI, ethics, and labor rights?
AJ, you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah, so I mean, I've always been of the belief that educational institutions have the potential to be incubators for change by producing scholar activists. If educational institutions are actually informing students about the kind of economy that they're going into, including things like we've covered in this presentation, surveillance mechanisms that management uses. It will prepare students to be advocates for themselves and their coworkers. In addition, I think that educational institutions can partner with organizations that promote responsible technological development. One of those that I'm aware of is Tectonic Justice, which is a new startup that is doing some work to ensure that new AI developments don't have an adverse effect on low-income populations. Omar, you might be aware of a few other organizations that do that kind of work.
Yeah, there's DAIR, DAIR, which is distributed AI research, which is headed by Tinmit Jebru. So she was a computer scientist for Google. She was part of their ethics team, and she published a paper basically arguing about the dangers of large language models, that they're too broad and they produce discriminatory outcomes. And then she got let go by Google. So she ended up starting her own institute where she's basically trying to, counter the influence of big tech and then create, more ethical AI where there's, basically the large language models that's fed into these machine learning software is more ethical and produces positive outcomes.
Right. Thank you. There's a question. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Just one more note on the on that last question. When I was a grad student, it was very, and I had to grade papers. It was very obvious when a student used ChatGPT to write a paper, and this is something that everyone in academia is seeing in recent years. And I think that an important way that educational institutions can play into this conversation is by establishing good habits in students, to recognize AI and not to rely on AI, so that when they do go out into the workforce, that habit is still there.
Thank you. I think that was going to be one of my questions, where how to deal with the hallucination of AI to make sure it will not mislead our students that are not that tech savvy. That was a question in the chat.
I guess I'm going to ask for clarification on what hallucination means, but I guess just not to be misled. Yeah, so I think there would be a good policy from the university to discourage the use of AI when it comes to intellectual output. I think that would be probably a good practice, and make sure that students are also recognize that sometimes these AI systems are not always 100% reliable. They do produce false information, and sometimes when you probe it even further, it'll start to contradict itself. And this has been witnessed with ChatGPT-3 and ChatGPT-4, and it's something that I experienced in my own research. When I think I mentioned it in a presentation, I was like, hey, this is something that I know the answer to. I wonder if it can tell me what the unemployment rate was in like 1940, or the home ownership in 1940, and it would just consistently give me wrong answers. So I think that it's like it kind of reminds me when I was in undergrad, where people were always like, hey, don't trust Wikipedia, right? Because Wikipedia can be edited by anybody. I think we need to have that same level of skepticism when it comes to these AI systems, because they don't always produce the correct answers. And so therefore, to ensure that students are not misled.
Thank you. There's another question, and that is, are we planning to build more data systems, and how will that affect what is going on?
Yeah, so the plan right now is for the big tech is basically going all out for with AI. They're investing hundreds of billions of dollars in creating data centers, which basically store and process, do computational. They'll give it computational power in order to power artificial intelligence. So it's in the pipeline that this is what they want. Their interest is basically to try to create the most effective, efficient artificial intelligence possible, and basically they're investing in this. Like it's sold. You know, the Trump administration has already said that they're backing you know, any new ventures for data centers, yeah. So basically, you know, it will be our job to basically make different kinds of arguments. You know, one of the arguments that we could probably say is that, hey, you know, all this technology should probably be, especially if we're going to be dependent more on it, we should be able to democratize this, have more universal access to it. Big tech shouldn't be the only one to have access to computational power. That we should probably be making an argument that this should be a public good or a public utility, that therefore communities themselves can, you know, maybe create their own large language models in order to solve their problems, instead of having big tech, which, you know, their main mission is to, you know, increase their, you know, basically. So that would be definitely a battle that, you know, that we need to have. And, you know, part of that starts with education and realizing and making people realize that, you know, that we are being misled about how advanced these technologies are. Yeah, that would be my answer.
Thank you. There's another question. How does it differentiate dialects?
Like the AI system itself, I'm not 100% sure if I have a good answer. I'm assuming like the different dialects and different languages. I do know that they do pretty decent jobs in translations, you know, because I'm also a Spanish speaker, and I've asked, you know, some AI systems, you know, I'll feed it like a paragraph or even like an article from, you know, from a news source, and then I'll ask it to translate it into Spanish, and it actually does a pretty decent job. It's not perfect, but it's, I think, you know, for any Spanish speaker, it'll be comprehensible. But as far as like dialects, that's actually a really good question, especially when it comes to like Spanish. Most of the time, the language materials are either Spanish from Spain or from Mexico, but I'm not sure if it would pick up, you know, Caribbean Spanish or you know, Spanish from Central America or South America. In English, it seems pretty much to be the American dialect, from my experience, but I don't know if it has. I've never tested it out to see if it actually can differentiate from different language dialects.
Thank you. And I believe the following question was, so this will hurt minorities at universities and public schools?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would agree with that that statement, which gives more of a reason why we need to organize. So not only in our workplaces, but in our communities, because this is something that considering the amount of money that that big tech is pouring into artificial intelligence, um, you know, this is going to start, you know, covering every aspect of our life. And some of the products that they're already making also sounds kind of like ridiculous, because like they have AI powered toothbrushes and AI powered Coca-Cola, and I'm not sure how that's, what the utility is behind that, but they are gonna, it is gonna creep into other parts of life, like education, where we need to have you know, a more serious conversation about it.
So that brings me to like, what strategies can Black professionals use to navigate like AI-driven hiring and workplace surveillance?
Andrew, would you like to take a stab at that?
Sure. I was just going to say we're in an era where equity in the workplace is constantly under attack. Particularly now, we're seeing like the dismantling of DEI initiatives across various different industries. So those in the professional class who have an interest in maintaining equity need to be very proactive about seeing the potential for discrimination in automated processes. Human oversight can always be flawed, of course, but the only thing more flawed than human oversight is a machine trained on human data sets that are flawed, right? human oversight is one step towards maintaining equity, and it's very easy for companies to simply outsource these processes to AI, as we're seeing. And as we discussed in the presentation, there are some serious legal issues that are emerging out of that because these automated processes are proving to be discriminatory. So if you're in the professional class, I would say be wary of using these tools, that are produced by these AI companies. Omar, would you have any other?
Yeah, I would add that this is, one of the reasons why we should be advocating for the democratization of AI resources and infrastructure, because that way we can develop our own AI models in order to, produce more equitable outcomes. So basically, we got to start looking at, computing power as a public good in order for, communities and individuals to basically create their own AI systems that would be to the benefit of their community. So that would be, one of the ways that we could, tackle this problem of, AI driven solutions.
Right. There's another question. Can you expand on how AI will negatively affect policing in the Black community?
Yes, so AI software. This has already been under attack by a lot of research institutions and news organizations, particularly ProPublica, where basically there's a bias in the data sets that the purpose is to have like predictive policing, who is more likely to commit a crime, and some of the research that has been conducted in this is basically saying that the AI systems identify Black Americans, Black people as more likely to commit a crime, and this creates this feeds into the mass incarceration that happens across the country. So this would lead to even more discriminatory policing effects that would negatively impact the Black community. And this is why, I would argue that this is why we should not have AI in policing at all. Because it can only be used to do more harm than to do well.
Thank you so much. Are there any more questions? Right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the discussion for AI surveillance in the Black workplace and how to organize against it. We appreciate you so much, Omar and AJ. Thank you so much. And for those who are tuning in with us on our Black History Month events, please continue to look at our website. We have so much more coming. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
No, thank you for having us and giving the opportunity to speak. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.